Before the crown touched his head, before armies bowed, before history whispered his name with fear and awe, there was a man the world refused to see. He existed at the edge of everything that mattered. At dawn, while merchants unlocked their stalls and gold caught its first light, he woke on cold stone. Dust clung to his skin like a second layer of shame. His ribs pressed against thin cloth worn down by years of survival. Hunger was not a feeling anymore. It was a constant presence, as familiar as breathing. People passed him without slowing. Some looked through him. Others looked away. Children were pulled back by parents, taught early that poverty was contagious. Guards treated him like debris, something to move aside, not acknowledge. To the city he was not a man. He was a reminder of what could go wrong. Yet from the ground, where boots ruled and mercy was rare, he saw what others missed. He watched power move. He noticed how wealthy men laughed loudly but glanced over their shoulders. How officials pretended confidence while calculating fear. How rulers depended on systems they barely understood. From the dirt, the world looked different, clearer. He listened while pretending not to exist. Trade secrets fell into his memory. Alliances revealed themselves in small gestures. He learned which symbols commanded obedience and which banners made soldiers stiffen with unease. Languages drifted past him daily, and he absorbed them not through study but necessity. He learned patience because impatience meant death. Every insult hardened him. Every night without food sharpened him. Years passed. His name disappeared. His past faded into scars. Whatever boy he had been no longer mattered. Survival stripped him down to something more dangerous than strength. Understanding. Then came the night the city broke. A conflict erupted near the market. Accusations turned into violence. Torches fell. Fear spread faster than fire. Guards lost control. Merchants fled. Power panicked. The city had seen chaos before, but never like this. And in that moment, when everyone else ran for safety, the beggar moved forward. Not with a weapon. Not with authority. But with certainty. No one noticed him at first. Why would they? The world had trained itself not to. But that night marked the final moment he would ever be invisible. Because destiny does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it rises from the dust. And when it does, it reshapes everything. The world believed greatness was born in palaces. It never imagined it could rise from the ground it stepped on every day. Long before the city reduced him to a shadow, before hunger became a companion and silence became protection, he was born into a place where life still had meaning beyond survival. His village lay far from the great trade routes, nestled between dry land and stubborn hope. It was not rich, but it was rooted. People knew one another's names. Elders remembered histories that never made it into written records. Children were raised on stories, not coins. In that village, power was not measured by how much one owned, but by how much one protected. He was born during a season of cautious rain, when the soil cracked less and crops dared to grow. His parents believed this meant something. That his life would be balanced, tested but not broken. As a child, he learned the rhythm of the land. When to plant, when to wait, when to listen. He followed elders as they spoke of ancient African kings who ruled with justice and discipline, leaders whose strength came not from cruelty, but from responsibility. Those stories mattered, because they planted something inside him long before the world tried to crush it. Then the land began to fail. First it was subtle. Rains arrived late. Harvests grew thin. Wells dropped lower. People prayed harder. Elders met more often. The air changed, heavy with worry that no one wanted to speak aloud. Hunger does not arrive suddenly. Creeps in quietly. Families began to ration. Arguments replaced laughter. The old certainty that tomorrow would be better began to weaken. Then came strangers. They did not arrive waving flags or declaring conquest. They came desperate, driven by the same hunger, carrying weapons because fear had taught them to trust nothing else. Borders meant nothing when survival was at stake. The village did not stand a chance. The night it fell, fire swallowed memory. Screams drowned prayer. Homes that had stood for generations collapsed into ash. He remembered clutching his mother's arm. He remembered being pulled away. He remembered running until the world became nothing but darkness and breath. By morning his childhood was over. His parents did not survive. There were no proper burials. No final words. Just bodies and silence and a child left standing where his world used to be. Grief does not ask permission. It hollowed him out quickly. The survivors scattered. Some followed traders. Others wandered blindly. The boy walked because standing still meant death. Each step carried him farther from everything he had known. The journey taught him his first brutal lesson. The world does not reward innocence. In the cities he discovered a new kind of cruelty. Not the violence of war, but the violence of indifference. He worked wherever someone would use him. He carried loads heavier than his body should bear. He cleaned. He hauled. He obeyed. When his strength faded, so did his value. No one asked his name. When hunger returned, begging was not a choice. It was survival. Shame burned hotter than the sun, but pride could not feed him. Each outstretched hand was a surrender of dignity. Some days he received scraps. Other days he received blows. He learned quickly where he was not allowed to exist. Markets, temples, wealthy districts. Guards treated him like dirt that refused to wash away. Merchants pushed him aside with their feet. Children learned to look through him. That hurt more than hunger. Years passed. His name disappeared. His identity eroded. He became what the city expected, a beggar. But something inside him resisted erasure. While others begged loudly, he listened quietly. He noticed patterns. He observed power from below. He saw how guards behaved differently around certain men. How traders changed tone when specific symbols appeared. How fear hid behind authority. From the dirt, the world revealed its truth. He learned languages by hearing them every day. Not formally, practically. Enough to understand deals, insults, commands. He memorized laws repeated during disputes. He learned which rules mattered and which existed only on paper. While sleeping in alleys, he studied the city's heartbeat. He realized something crucial. Those who ruled were not always the smartest. They were simply positioned higher. And positions could change. Hunger sharpened his mind. Pain refined his patience. Every humiliation became fuel. He stopped seeing himself as a victim and started seeing himself as a witness. The city believed he was nothing. That belief became his greatest weapon. When famine struck again years later, panic spread quickly. Granaries tightened. Prices soared. Violence simmered just beneath the surface. Officials argued. Merchants accused one another. Guards grew nervous. The city was unraveling. And the beggar understood something no one else did. Systems always collapse before people notice. He had seen it before. He had survived it. And when the moment came, when chaos demanded clarity, he would not be silent. The boy who had lost everything had learned something invaluable. Power does not come from what you are given. Comes from what you endure and remember. By the time the city truly noticed the beggar, he had already spent years studying it. He knew its rhythms better than those who ruled it. He understood which markets thrived at dawn and which collapsed by dusk. He memorized the patrol patterns of guards, the unspoken boundaries between districts, the invisible lines where wealth ended and desperation began. From the ground, everything was clearer. Power, he learned, was not loud. It did not shout in public squares or boast in crowded halls. True power whispered. It moved quietly through symbols, favors, gestures so small they escaped notice. And because no one believed a beggar capable of thought beyond survival, no one guarded their secrets from him. He sat near courthouses and listened as officials argued over trade laws they barely understood. He watched merchants negotiate deals while pretending not to hear their boasts. He observed how certain names caused immediate silence, how certain colors on clothing demanded respect. He noticed fear more than authority. The guards who pretended confidence were often the most uncertain. The officials who punished harshly were often protecting their own fragile positions. The wealthiest men were rarely the most secure. This understanding became his education. Hunger forced him to move constantly. He drifted between districts, becoming a familiar but unimportant presence everywhere. A man too broken to matter, too common to notice. But he was collecting something far more valuable than coins: knowledge. During one season of rising tension, when trade routes became unstable and rival merchant groups clashed openly, the city's fragile balance began to crack. Disputes grew violent. Accusations of theft and betrayal spread. Each faction demanded justice, but no one agreed on whose law applied. Officials struggled. Laws contradicted one another. Old treaties were forgotten. Every decision threatened retaliation. The city teetered, and the moment power noticed him did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with suspicion. After the chaos in the market was calmed, after the officials realized the beggar had prevented bloodshed not with force but with understanding, they did not praise him. Men in authority rarely celebrated surprises. They feared them. Instead, they watched him. At first, he was questioned informally. Quiet inquiries disguised as curiosity. He was asked how he knew certain laws, how he recognized old trade symbols, how a man with nothing could understand systems built for elites. He answered simply, carefully. He revealed enough to seem useful, but not enough to seem dangerous. That balance saved his life. Because in a city built on hierarchy, a man who rises too quickly is often crushed just as fast. Rather than elevating him publicly, the officials did something far more calculated. They pulled him into the shadows. They gave him small tasks, minor responsibilities that carried no title but great risk. Carry messages between rival factions. Observe disputes and report patterns. Stand quietly during negotiations and remember details others missed. He became a tool. But tools can reshape empires. As weeks passed, his value became undeniable. Messages arrived on time. Conflicts de-escalated before turning violent. Misunderstandings dissolved under his quiet clarity. He noticed inconsistencies in trade accounts that seasoned officials overlooked. He connected dots others didn't know existed. Still, he was never trusted fully. He was watched more closely than anyone else. Every success raised new questions. Who was he really? Where had he learned so much? What did he want? The truth unsettled them. He did not want wealth. He did not demand comfort. He did not ask for recognition. He asked only for access. And access frightened them more than ambition. His sleeping place changed. He no longer slept in the open streets, but neither was he welcomed into the halls of power. He existed in between, close enough to influence decisions, far enough to be blamed if things went wrong. That position was dangerous. But he understood danger better than anyone. While nobles argued over pride and tradition, he focused on outcomes. While officials protected status, he protected stability. When faced with decisions that would benefit the powerful at the expense of the many, he chose balance. The city responded. Markets steadied. Food became more available. Violence dropped. Ordinary people felt the change even if they did not know his name. And that was when the whispers began. Among merchants, among guards, among the poor, people started asking how the city had become calmer so suddenly. Why disputes were resolved faster. Why famine relief reached places it never had before. The answer unsettled the elite. Because the people did not credit the rulers. They credited the results. And results pointed quietly toward a man who was never meant to matter. The beggar's influence grew, not because he demanded loyalty, but because his decisions worked. People trusted outcomes more than titles. That trust was dangerous. Because power does not fear competence. It fears legitimacy. The elite began to feel exposed. They noticed how often his advice shaped outcomes. How often plans succeeded only when he was involved. How often others deferred to his understanding. They began to resent him. Resentment turned into suspicion. Suspicion into paranoia. He was excluded from certain meetings. Information was withheld. Decisions were made without him, only to fail spectacularly. The city felt the difference immediately. And for the first time, the rulers understood something chilling. They needed him more than he needed them. That realization planted fear. Fear breeds betrayal. False rumors spread quietly. Accusations hinted that he manipulated outcomes for personal gain. That he stirred unrest to increase his influence. That he could not be trusted. None of it was proven. None of it needed to be. In systems built on hierarchy, perception is more powerful than truth. One morning, guards arrived where he slept. The chains were familiar. Cold iron closed around wrists that had once begged for mercy. The city watched as he was marched through streets that now depended on his unseen labor. Some people noticed. Some felt something was wrong. But most were afraid to speak. He did not resist. He did not plead. Because he understood something crucial. Power reveals itself fully only when it believes it has won. In confinement, stripped once more of status and safety, he waited. And as days passed, the city began to unravel. Disputes resurfaced. Alliances strained. Markets faltered. Decisions stalled. The rulers scrambled. They had removed the pillar holding their system upright. And now everything shook. The beggar, sitting in darkness, felt no panic. He had lived without power before. They had not. And for the first time, the city's rulers realized the truth too late. They had not elevated a beggar. They had discovered a king. The city did not fall apart all at once. It cracked slowly, like stone under constant pressure. At first, the rulers convinced themselves the chaos was temporary. They told one another that removing a beggar, no matter how clever, could not truly destabilize a system built over generations. They believed authority was permanent, that hierarchy would correct itself. But systems do not collapse because of weakness. They collapse because of arrogance. Without him, disputes lingered unresolved. Meetings ended in confusion rather than clarity. Merchants grew suspicious again, guarding their goods instead of trading them. Old rivalries resurfaced, sharpened by hunger and fear. Markets that once moved smoothly now stalled. Prices fluctuated wildly. Food deliveries were delayed, mismanaged, redirected. The poorest neighborhoods felt it first, as they always did. The people sensed something was wrong. Not because they knew who was missing, but because stability had vanished. Guards became harsher. Authority relied on force where understanding once prevailed. Punishments increased. Curfews tightened. Fear returned to the streets. And fear is expensive. Trade slowed. Caravans hesitated. Foreign partners grew cautious. The city's reputation, so carefully maintained, began to erode. Inside council chambers, tension rose. Officials blamed one another. Advisors argued over interpretations of law that no longer made sense. Solutions contradicted each other. Every decision sparked new conflict. They searched for the problem everywhere, except where it truly was. The beggar remained imprisoned, isolated from the city's chaos. Iron chains marked his wrists. Stone walls enclosed him. But his mind remained clear. He had seen this before. He recognized the signs of collapse because he had lived through it as a child. Hunger followed confusion. Violence followed hunger. Desperation followed violence. And desperation forces choices. The rulers resisted admitting the truth. To do so would mean acknowledging that a man they had once dismissed, mocked, chained, ignored, had become essential. Pride delayed them. And pride nearly destroyed everything. Riots broke out in districts where food shipments failed to arrive. Merchants armed themselves. Guards turned brutal. People fled areas they had once called home. Whispers returned, this time louder. Some remembered the calm that had existed before. Some remembered how disputes ended quickly. Some remembered how the city had felt balanced, almost peaceful. Questions spread. Who had been guiding those decisions? Why had everything worsened so suddenly? Slowly, carefully, the truth surfaced. It did not arrive as praise. It arrived as realization. The city had functioned because of someone it never intended to honor. The rulers faced an impossible choice. To continue without him meant collapse. To free him meant surrendering pride. Desperation chose for them. Quietly, without ceremony, the order was given. The chains were removed. Not with apology. Not with gratitude. With fear. He was brought before those who had imprisoned him. The room felt different now. Authority no longer sat comfortably in its seats. Eyes avoided his. They did not offer forgiveness. They offered responsibility. They asked him to fix what they had broken. To restore stability. To calm the city. To hold everything together once more. Temporary authority, they said. Limited control. Enough power to repair damage. But not enough to threaten them. He listened. He understood exactly what they were offering. Chance. Not to serve them, but to expose them. He accepted. Because power does not always arrive as a crown. Sometimes it arrives as a problem no one else can solve. He moved quickly. Trade routes were restored. Supplies redirected. Corrupt officials quietly removed from key positions. Decisions were made based on outcomes, not pride. The city responded immediately. Markets reopened. Violence decreased. Order returned. Not through force but through trust. The people felt it. They may not have known his name, but they recognized competence. Stability returned faster than anyone expected. And this time they noticed who made it happen. Support grew quietly at first. Among merchants who trusted their profits again. Among guards relieved to enforce order without brutality. Among ordinary people who felt safe enough to breathe. Loyalty formed not by command, but by relief. The rulers watched carefully. They had freed a solution. But they feared they had unleashed something far more dangerous. Because the city no longer relied on tradition. It relied on him. And power, once transferred in practice, rarely returns willingly. The beggar understood this better than anyone. He had lived without power. He knew what it meant to survive its absence. And now, as authority slowly bent toward him, he prepared for the final transformation. From the man who fixed the system, to the man the system could no longer function without. Stability returned to the city faster than anyone expected. What had once taken weeks of argument now required only days of decisive action. Trade flowed again, not because fear forced it, but because confidence restored it. Caravans resumed their routes. Merchants lowered prices. Food reached neighborhoods that had long been neglected. Order did not arrive loudly. It arrived naturally. The beggar, no longer imprisoned, no longer ignored, worked without spectacle. He did not demand titles. He did not claim credit. He focused on outcomes. Every decision carried memory. Of hunger, of chaos, of systems failing the most vulnerable. And because of that, the city responded. The people felt the difference even before they understood its source. Streets grew calmer. Violence diminished. Guards enforced rules without cruelty. Markets buzzed with cautious optimism. For the first time in years, the city breathed. Whispers turned into conversations. Who was responsible? Some remembered seeing him near the markets during the worst times. Others recalled how disputes ended when he became involved. Slowly, quietly, his presence took shape in public consciousness. Not as a beggar, but as a stabilizing force. The rulers noticed. They watched how often officials deferred to him. How often merchants sought his guidance. How guards trusted his instructions. Authority was shifting without ceremony. Not seized. Granted. That frightened the elite. Because power bestowed by the people cannot be revoked easily. Attempts were made to limit him. Committees were formed, rules reinstated, authority reasserted on paper. But reality ignored paperwork. When crises arose, people turned to him. When decisions mattered, his word carried weight. And when rumors spread that his authority might be reduced, unrest stirred again. The city had learned something dangerous. It had learned what competent leadership felt like. The rulers debated privately. Some argued he must be removed again, quickly before loyalty solidified further. Others warned that such a move would spark rebellion. Fear divided them. Meanwhile, the people made their choice. It happened gradually. Merchants pledged resources without being asked. Guards followed his commands instinctively. Elders spoke his name with respect. The poor, once invisible, felt represented for the first time. Support crystallized into allegiance. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. The rulers sensed the shift too late. The city no longer saw him as a servant of authority. It saw authority in him. When a major external threat emerged, a coalition of rival cities threatening invasion, the rulers panicked. Military leaders argued. Diplomats failed. The situation demanded clarity. All eyes turned toward the man who had already proven himself. He was given command. Not symbolically. Absolutely. He reorganized defenses, strengthened alliances, anticipated enemy movements, prepared the city not just for survival but dominance. The threat dissolved before conflict began. Neighboring powers withdrew. The city stood stronger than it had in generations. At that moment, the illusion of shared power shattered. There was no denying it anymore. The beggar had become indispensable. The people demanded what the rulers feared most: change. The council resisted. Tradition was invoked. Bloodlines cited. Laws quoted. But legitimacy had already shifted. Crowds gathered, not in riot but in resolve. The army stood firm, not in rebellion but in allegiance. Merchants closed ranks, not in protest but in unity. The city had chosen. The crown was no longer a symbol of lineage. It was a symbol of trust. The rulers faced the final truth. They could step aside peacefully, or be swept away by the force of unity they could no longer control. The beggar did not celebrate. He did not boast. He accepted responsibility. And in that acceptance he became king, not because he wanted power, but because he understood what happened when it was abused or ignored. The crown touched his head without ceremony. The dust of his past still clung to him, and that dust would shape his reign. The crown did not change him, but it revealed him. From the first day of his reign, the city felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not blind loyalty, but clarity. Orders were precise. Justice was swift but measured. Corruption was not punished theatrically. It was erased methodically. Those who expected a ruler obsessed with revenge were disappointed. Those who expected weakness were destroyed. The king ruled like a man who had lived at the bottom of the world and climbed upward without forgetting every step. His first decree stunned the elite. He ordered a complete accounting of the city's wealth, not to increase taxes, but to expose hoarding. Gold hidden in private vaults while citizens starved was reclaimed and redistributed into public works. Irrigation canals, grain reserves, roads connecting forgotten districts. Hunger declined within months. Not vanished, but weakened. And that frightened neighboring rulers more than armies ever could. Because a fed population does not rebel. It expands. Trade multiplied. Caravans doubled. Foreign merchants arrived with caution, and left with awe. The city became a magnet of stability in a volatile region. And stability breeds influence. The king restructured the military, not around conquest but defense and intelligence. Scouts replaced brute force. Strategy replaced spectacle. He understood something most kings never learned. Wars are won before swords are drawn. When neighboring states tested his resolve, they did not find chaos. They found preparation. Borders held firm. Supply lines were protected. Allies were cultivated quietly. Enemies discovered that attacking his kingdom was not impossible, just disastrous. Word spread, not of cruelty, but of inevitability. Rulers began sending envoys, not threats. Gifts, not ultimatums. Some sought alliances. Others sought guidance. All recognized the same truth. This king was different. He did not rule by myth. He ruled by memory. He remembered sleeping hungry beneath open skies. He remembered being ignored, dismissed, silenced. And because of that, he listened. Every month, he walked among the people unannounced. Not disguised, recognized. He stood in markets, spoke with farmers, listened to widows, questioned guards. No performance. No illusion. He wanted to feel the ground beneath his feet. The elite hated this. They whispered that he undermined tradition, that he blurred lines between ruler and ruled, that he weakened the mystique of power. They were wrong. He redefined it. Power under his reign was not distance. It was presence. His court became a place of debate, not flattery. Advisors were chosen for competence, not bloodline. Former slaves became administrators. Former beggars became tax auditors. Those who earned trust kept it. Those who abused it vanished quietly. Fear existed, but not of the king. Fear existed of justice. As the kingdom prospered, borders expanded, not through conquest but absorption. Smaller states sought protection. Regions long ignored pledged loyalty willingly. The empire grew, and with it legends. Stories spread across deserts and seas, of a king who once begged, who now commanded armies without raising his voice. Of a ruler who measured success not in gold, but in stability. Some called him the poor man's king. Others called him the Iron King. Enemies called him dangerous. They were all correct, because his greatest weapon was understanding systems. He dismantled old hierarchies and replaced them with accountability. He weakened nobles without executing them. He neutralized threats without open war. The world watched and learned. Some rulers attempted to imitate him. They failed, because imitation without empathy becomes tyranny. His strength came from memory, of suffering lived, not studied. Yet success carries shadows. As his power expanded, expectations grew heavier. Every failure was magnified. Every compromise scrutinized. Every delay questioned. He felt the weight. At night, alone in chambers far removed from the streets he once slept on, he wondered whether power would eventually corrupt even him. Whether memory fades. Whether hunger, once satisfied, loses its urgency. He instituted safeguards, systems that would function without him. Councils independent of royal favor. Laws written clearly, enforced consistently. Because he knew something few rulers admit. No king is permanent. Only systems endure. That humility unsettled rivals. They preferred kings who believed themselves eternal. Because eternal kings are predictable. He was not. When a major coalition formed against him, afraid of his growing influence, it did not declare war immediately. It waited, observed, tested his alliances. The storm was coming. He felt it, and prepared, not just militarily, but morally, because the next phase of his reign would not be about building power. It would be about defending what he had built. At any cost. It whispers. The king felt it first not in rebellion or invasion, but in silence. Messages arrived slower. Eyes lingered longer before answering. Allies spoke carefully, as if measuring every word. The empire was vast now. Too vast for a single man to touch every corner the way he once touched the streets of his city. And enemies understood something dangerous. They could not defeat him openly. They would have to survive him. Plots formed not among peasants, but among the educated elite, the ones who had lost privileges when merit replaced lineage. Men who smiled in court and cursed in private. Women who praised reform publicly and funded resistance quietly. They did not want his throne. They wanted his absence. The king knew this. And still, he did not retreat into paranoia. 'Cause fear makes tyrants. Instead, he doubled down on transparency. Records were made public. Decisions documented. Succession laws clarified. He did something unheard of. He prepared for a future without himself. That frightened them more than any army. Because a king who plans his own replacement cannot be controlled by threats of chaos. When the first major betrayal occurred, it was subtle. A trusted governor delayed grain shipments. Famine did not explode, but it simmered. Blame drifted toward the crown. The king responded not with execution, but investigation. Evidence surfaced. The governor vanished. Quietly. No public spectacle. No warning. The message spread faster than fear ever could. Disloyalty would not be dramatic. It would be final. But betrayal is a disease. Once it appears, it multiplies. A faction within the court conspired with foreign powers, promising weakened borders in exchange for future autonomy. They underestimated him. He intercepted communications months before they acted, and chose mercy. He removed them from power, stripped titles, exiled them, not out of kindness but calculation. Martyrs inspire rebellion. Failures inspire caution. Still the pressure mounted. The empire demanded constant vigilance. Every decision rippled across regions he had never walked. The distance between ruler and people widened despite his efforts. The king aged, not visibly, but deeply. One night, he returned to the place where it had begun, a forgotten corner of the city where stone met dust, where hunger once slept beside him. He stood alone. No guards, no crown. And remembered. He remembered being invisible. He remembered surviving. And understood the truth no legend would record. Power had not freed him. It had burdened him with responsibility greater than survival. Soon after, illness struck. Not sudden. Gradual. The court denied it. Rumors spread faster than truth. Rivals watched eagerly. He refused to rule from a bed. He summoned the council. Spoke plainly. He announced the succession, not naming blood but principles. The next ruler would be chosen by council and people together. Bound by laws, not lineage. Gasps filled the chamber. He had done the unthinkable. He removed divinity from kingship. And in doing so preserved it. Some begged him to reconsider. Others prayed. Enemies smiled quietly, thinking weakness had finally arrived. They were wrong. Because his final act was his most powerful. He ordered the release of a full account of his life. Not legend but truth. His failures documented alongside his victories. His origins recorded clearly. Beggar. A survivor. King. Nothing hidden. Because memory, he knew, is harder to destroy than monuments. When he died, there were no riots. No collapse. No vacuum. The system held. The empire endured. Foreign powers waited for chaos. Never came. Instead, something stranger happened. His name became dangerous. Not because it inspired rebellion, but because it inspired comparison. Every ruler after him was measured against the impossible standard of a man who ruled without forgetting hunger. They tried to erase him. Some historians minimized him. Others mythologized him beyond recognition. But the people remembered differently. They told stories not of crowns, but of a king who listened. Of laws that worked. Of streets that felt safer. Of a ruler who proved that greatness does not begin with birthright. It begins with endurance. Centuries later, his statues were worn. His palaces faded. But his impact remained embedded in institutions, in ideas, in the unspoken belief that power could come from the bottom. And that belief was the most dangerous legacy of all. Because once people know a beggar can become king, no throne is safe from change. No history can fully erase the truth.